final presentation, and for me, probably going to be the most interesting one. A lot of people aren't familiar with Sikhism, and I'm looking forward to learning more. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. Welcome, Laura.
Okay.
And let's go.
The word Sikh comes from the Punjabi word meaning disciple or learner. Sikhism is a monotheistic religion that originated in the Punjab region of South Asia during the 15th century. Sikhs worship God, who exists beyond all appearances and who is universally available to all, whether they be Hindu, Muslim, or of any other faith. Sikhism is an Indian faith that is rooted in the lineage of 10 gurus from the Punjab, the North Indian Territory, where roughly 75% of its 20 million adherents still live. The Sikh chief characteristics are an ardent devotion to God and an ethos of martial valor. The first guru, Guru Nanak, was a wandering bard and mystic who sang praises to a formless God that belongs exclusively to neither Hindus nor Muslims, but fundamentally unites them both. From the wisdom of this guru and 9 other gurus following him, many practices were developed into what Sikhism is today. The Adi Granth, also called the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book containing these hymns, is the central focus of Sikh practice. To them, however, it is not considered a scripture, but a perceptual living guru itself. Their temples are called the Gurudwara, the most known of which is the Golden Temple of Amritsar. Sikh worship involves the singing of hymns and the recitation of the name of God, developing love towards humanity and the divine, and leading, eventually, to the end of reincarnation in the experience ultimate unity with God. Gobind Singh, their 10th and final guru, also decreed that when the Sikhs could not find answer in the Guru Granth Sahib, that they should decide issues as a community based on the principles of their scripture. There are 3 primary principles of Sikhism. These are to always be absorbed in meditation and prayer, make an honest income by honorable methods, and to share earnings and selflessly serve others. In Sikhism, there are 5 sins to be avoided: pride, greed, lust, anger, and attachment. Sikhs are spiritually reborn by taking part in the baptism ceremony conducted by the 5 beloved Sikhs, initiated members who prepare and administer immortalizing nectar to initiates by stirring sugar into water with a sword. Sikhs also have 4 holy commandments. Do not dishonor the Creator's intentions by cutting your hair. Do not harm the body with tobacco or intoxicants. Do not eat sacrificial meat, and do not commit adultery. Sikhs also have no idols, ignore the old caste system of pre-modern India, and value honest labor and social services. They also do not become renunciates in the traditional sense. As Guru Nanak explained to the monks of the Himalayas, how will the world be served if the pious people retire to the mountains and lend no helping hand in any attempt to solve the problems of the day? Thus, Sikhs renunciate within the modern world instead of leaving it behind. They renounce evil desires and attachments to material goods, while retaining relationships with their families. The Sikh turban, called a dastar, is a badge of identity that derives from the list of 5 precepts, also called Ks. These items are articles of faith that collectively form the external identity and a demonstration of a commitment to the way of life. The first of which is uncut hair, kesh. Second, a wooden brush for the hair, kanga. A metal bracelet, kara. A specific style of cotton undergarments, kachera. And a small ceremonial dagger or sword, kirpan. Together they symbolize orderly spiritual protection and unity with God, restraint, and a readiness to fight. It was Guru Gobind Singh, who was a warrior poet and institutionalized the duty to bear arms in the face of oppression. Sikhs also have a history of being discriminated against by those who are unaware of their faith, confusing them with Muslim extremists, mostly because in America, the dastar is widely misunderstood.
So, Sikhism is one of the newer religions, relatively speaking. It's only about 500 years old, when most of the other major religions we talk about are 1,000 or several thousand years old. It is followed by about 26 million people in the world, the vast majority of those being still in India. And most of them are Indian. There's no preclusion for non-Indians to convert to Sikhism, but in fact, few of them do. And a Sikh fellow I knew had, when the question was put to him about would they want people to convert to Sikhism, he says, it's not necessary. If you just get to the center of your own religion, that's all that's necessary. So it is the third of the Indian religions we're looking at. And there's basically one more major religion that grew out of India, which Jainism, which not taking the time to talk about in this series. In fact, there are more Sikhs in the world than there are Jews. Judaism only has about 15 million. So it's very interesting, with Judaism being almost 4,000 years old, Sikhism is 500, and there's so many more Sikhs than Jews. Sikhism has the view that all of humanity can be united. We are all children of one God, but there's that unity does not have to mean that we're all become one religion. One of the hallmarks of Sikhism that makes it a modern religion is that it does specifically hold that males and females are equal. Many religions, older ones in particular, tend to view males as superior to females. Of course, every religion, there's modern variants that are more egalitarian. And the founder of Sikhism is quoted as saying, there is no Muslim, there's no Hindu, all are equal human beings because we are all the children of the same Father God. So in a sense, Sikhism rises above religious differences. And it didn't actually start out being a specific religion. That only happened over time as it developed. So let's talk about how it started, and then we'll talk about this development. The founder of Sikhism is referred to as Guru Nanak. He was born in 1469, died in 1538. He was born into a Hindu family, but his upbringing was in an area of India at the time, 500 years ago, that was densely populated with both Muslims as well as Hindus. So he was exposed to both of these faiths from an early age. At the time, there was a spiritual tradition known as the Sant or Saint tradition. And these were people who were more spiritually minded and rose above the religious differences between Muslim and Hindu. And they came from both of these faith traditions. They tended to focus inwardly on devotion to God, regardless of, Muslims, their God, Hindus, whichever favorite God they had. It didn't really make a difference. It was just a devotional approach. They tended to compose songs, devotional hymns, which was the focus of their worship, was singing these hymns. And in fact, that was incorporated into Sikhism as well, and to this day is a main form of devotional worship in Sikhism. So Nanak was a follower of both Hindu and Muslim mystics from this Sant tradition. And he too composed and sang hymns of devotion, which the word kirtan is a reference to this. We find kirtan in Hinduism as well, but kirtan in Sikhism is a major part of their devotions. And this is, you go to a Sikh temple and you hear them singing kirtan, the various hymns that were composed by Nanak and the other Sikh gurus. In times, Nanak drew a following of his own, and they were called Sikhs because the word Sikh means disciple. And it's pronounced Sikh, like S-I-C-K, but many people refer to it as Sikh, S-E-E-K. Either way is an accepted pronunciation. And his own following started in the year 1499. The story goes that Nanak had gone to bathe in a river, and when his friends came looking for him, they found his clothes by the side of the river, but they didn't find him, and he was missing for 3 days. And when he finally did come back out of the river, he was preaching this message that transcended both Muslim and Hindu traditions. So he apparently had some kind of mystical realization, and we could mark the year 1499 then as the start of Sikhism. But as I alluded to earlier, it didn't just start overnight. It actually took a good 200 years to fully develop into the religion as it is now present in the world. They referred to their leaders over time, succession, as the gurus. And there's, unlike Hinduism, which has many gurus at any one time, even down to today, Sikhism only had one guru at a time. So it kind of more follows like the succession of the popes, for instance. And they refer to God as Waheguru, or the ultimate guru. Nanak's teachings, he preached a unifying message that overcame the religious differences between Muslim and Hindu, but theoretically religious differences between whatever religions one might be concerned about. And as such, he united both Hindu and Muslim in a common devotion to God. In fact, his followers came from both Hindu and Muslim backgrounds, and the hymns that came to be incorporated in what is now the Sikh holy text were composed by Sikh gurus, but also if there were hymns from Muslim saints or Hindu saints, as long as the message was in alignment with Sikh values, they incorporated that as well. It's been said that the Sikh holy text is the only text to include writings from people from other religions besides its own. So Nanak recognized that behind all the human names for God, there is only one God, and regardless of what human beings call that God, they refer to this God, I said earlier, Waheguru, the great guru, or Satnam, the true name. The true name of God is beyond all the names that humans might give. And I brought a couple of texts that I've collected from the local Sikh temple, and if I can just share some of the messages here. References to the Sikh view of God. So some quotes from the holy text. God is the Lord of the whole universe. He alone is the father, mother for all of us. While the universe is moving and changing according to his will, he alone is unchanged beyond time. He is neither born and nor is he to die. He is ever existing. All people are his children. No one community or people of any particular religion has a franchise on him or his blessings to claim that God is theirs alone, and other communities will be sent to hell. All people will be judged by their deeds alone, and no one who loves God achieves the mission. Anyone who loves God achieves the mission of his life. We will be judged by our deeds, not by the name of the faith we adopt. God is not sectarian, preached Nanak. According to Sikhism, all people are loved by Father God and are equally able to realize him. So not only did Sikhism emphasize the equality of male and female, they also emphasize the equality of all human beings, regardless of cultural background or race or religion or even caste, as equal under God. One of Sikhism's great strengths is its universal appeal. It works for the good of all people, regardless of their religion, and has as its nucleus not a collection of rituals and dogmas, but a belief in the search of and defense of truth and justice. Nanak did reject what he considered to be meaningless ritual. I think a lot of people we talk about just going through the motions, and Nanak did not want his followers for ritual to just become meaningless in that sense. So although over time Sikhism did develop some rituals, they're compared to other religions, they're relatively minimal. Nanak in Sikhism also rejects the use of images and idols of God in favor of just a simple heartfelt devotion. When you go to a Sikh temple, you don't find images of God like you do in a Hindu temple. So in a sense, there are elements of Sikhism that reflect the Islamic culture of its day, but also elements of Hinduism. So it kind of, well, I tend to say it draws from both traditions, but Sikhs would say that's just coincidental. They don't consider that their religion is kind of a combination of the best of both religions. They view the message of their gurus as a unique revelation. As far as the beliefs go, it is a monotheistic religion. Pretty much all the other religions that developed in India are not monotheistic, or well, Hindus say they're monotheistic, but they appear to look like a polytheism. It's kind of a mix of both. And Buddhism and Jainism are both non-theistic. We talked last week about how Buddhism doesn't really focus on a god at all. But this is one way that Sikhism parallels Islam, in that it is a strictly monotheistic religion, and yet it also holds that people can call God by whatever name. Just because the names are different doesn't mean the God is different. Some of the names that Sikhs use, Satnam, the true name, Waheguru, the great guru. Sikhism also teaches on the equality of human beings, rejecting the caste system that was so prevalent in Hinduism at the time. And so this is another way that Sikhism is more similar to Islam, because Islam also, having come into India but not developed out of India, never had a caste system and did not buy into the caste system of India. Although Nanak and many of his followers were from a Hindu background, they too rejected the idea of caste, and particularly discrimination based on caste. And like all of the religions that developed out of India, it shares with the concepts of karma and reincarnation. So, Sikhism does believe in reincarnation, And the whole focus of life, they say, would be to get closer to God. And when you've gotten as close to God as possible, then the cycle of reincarnation ends. But they don't really focus specifically on trying to achieve that goal. It's more about just being close to God. That is the goal. And the natural result of that is to be united with God in afterlife. And Sikhism does reject asceticism or monastic life. I talked last week about how monasticism is an important part of Buddhism. And in Jainism, the ascetic practices, such as the Buddha Siddhartha practiced for 6 years before becoming the Buddha, and he rejected that for a middle way, but Buddhism didn't reject monasticism as an option. There is no monastic pursuit in Sikhism. All of Sikhs live in the world. The video we saw alluded to this with the reference that if pious people go off into the forests and the mountains, who's going to help solve the problems of the world? So a practical approach that's guided by a video put it an inward monasticism, an inward asceticism or renunciate. They say that the spirit of Nanak, the guru, is passed down through each of the successive gurus. In fact, they refer to these as the 10 Nanaks. I don't pretend to understand how that works, if they mean it literally or figuratively, but this is what they say. And this series of human gurus then proceeded through a period of about 200 years from the time of Nanak to the death of the 10th guru. Let me see if I can share another few readings here. So when it comes to Nanak and Sikhism's view of different people not being so different, Nanak preached that a believer of a faith should not be considered as a non-believer by followers of the other faiths. He claimed there is no Muslim, there's no Hindu, all are equal human beings because they're the children of the same Father God. His message was of one God and the brotherhood of humanity. Religion was to be a uniting force rather than a dividing force. God does not identify people by their sectarian religions. And Nanak said, for my spiritual guidance, I do not believe in Hinduism or Islam, and neither do I follow their rituals. To strive to become one with God's pervasive nature is the service of true worship. He decried meaningless, hollow rituals, wanting people to realize God by observing his existence in every human being and everywhere in nature. As far as the rejection of caste is concerned, irrespective of their caste, creed, economic status, sex, or religion, all people were considered equal and were welcome to join in the Sikh gatherings. The claim of some religious leaders that only the followers of their faith would be saved and others would be sent to hell was totally wrong. So this is a typical kind of image you'd find in a Sikh temple that features the 10 gurus. As most of them are wearing a turban and have a beard, and that in fact ended up becoming the hallmark appearance of many Sikh men. In fact, some Sikh women also wear the turban, and in fact, some women who have facial hair issue also choose to let it grow. So the development of the faith after Nanak, the second Guru, developed a written form of the language Punjabi. Punjabi was the common vernacular of the day, but it didn't have a written form. And so in order to compose and record these hymns, they needed to create a written form of the language. To this day, Sikh children learn Punjabi as part of their Sunday school activities. The third Guru instituted a community kitchen referred to as the langar in order to feed the hungry and any in need. To this day, Sikh temples around the world always have a large kitchen and they're always cooking food. And at least in India, the Sikh temples and the kitchens in those temples are open I don't want to say 24/7, but 7 days a week. And people know that if they're hungry, they can visit a local Gurdwara Sikh temple and receive a good hearty meal. It's nothing fancy, but it is a full meal and it is good and hearty. And it is vegetarian. Sikhs themselves are not necessarily vegetarian. That's an individual option. But in order to be more universal in the temples, because many people who come will be vegetarian, they only serve vegetarian foods in their langars. Now, when the langar was initiated, there's an interesting story about this here. So the premise of the langar is that everybody is to eat together. It's sort of a test of faith. If you truly believe that all people are equal. Now, back 500 years ago in India, with caste distinctions being very strong, the people of different castes would not eat together. So if you truly wanted to follow Sikhism, you had to demonstrate your willingness to overlook social class distinctions. And the langar was one way of doing this. In order to amalgamate the so-called untouchables with the rest of the population, the Guru made it obligatory for all persons to sit together and partake of food in the langar before they were allowed to attend the congregational meetings and prayers. This removed the inferiority complex of the low caste people and the untouchables, and it simultaneously depleted the vanity of rich and high caste people. This was necessary if mutual bonds of human feeling were to be developed among all sections of society. There was a point at which one of the leaders of the society liked this idea, and he wanted to support it with government funds, but the Guru rejected this. The Guru stated that that the langar had to remain a community affair. Langar had to be run out of the voluntary contributions of the disciples or Sikhs and not from the donations of the emperor. So the langar is literally, it's a free kitchen. And I've heard it referred to that way. And it is not, it was called non-governmental agency, as it were, with a soup kitchen before soup kitchens became popular in this nation. The fourth Guru developed what's become the holy city of Amritsar in Punjab region of India. Amritsar to this day does remain if you will, the center point of Sikhism. Amritsar is to Sikhism as Jerusalem is to Judaism or Mecca is to Islam. And it was basically, there was nothing there until the Sikh Gurus started to develop this land. And then the fifth Guru built the Golden Temple in Amritsar, which again to this day remains the headquarters of Sikhism worldwide. It's a place of pilgrimage as well as worship and langar. It's really a huge complex. And I can share you a picture of this. You've got the Golden Temple, literally, it's gilded in gold leaf. And this structure itself is not terribly large. It's in the center of a pool of water surrounded kind of like a moat. The pool of water is for purification rites, but it's also just beautifying. And surrounded on the outside of this is the entire temple complex with the kitchen, and I believe they also have like dormitories for homeless people, and Sikhs from all over come. There's no requirement that Sikhs make pilgrimage to this place, but they do like to go there. And they, again, they do their kirtan. You can hear the music there as well, just as you can in any Sikh temple. The fifth guru also compiled the hymns from the earlier gurus and added some of his own and put that into writing. So the start of the Sikh holy book, what they refer to as the Adi Granth. Adi Granth simply means the first book, as it were, or the original book. Unfortunately, the fifth guru was martyred. And at that point, Sikhism came to be more on the defense. This was about 100 years in after the time of Nanak. Sikhism had a growing attraction, particularly for the lower castes of society. As you might imagine, a religion that says all people are equal is going to be particularly appealing for those of low castes. But because it was growing, and at this point in time in India, the Muslim Mughals were in political control of India, and they feared the increasing influence of this new religion, and figuring, well, if there's one human person who's leading it, if we cut that down, it's like cutting the root of the tree and the whole thing will fall apart. That's not quite what happened, but this would have been the thinking. So the fifth guru was martyred, and under the sixth guru, there began a transition to martial training for defensive purposes, and the Sikhs from that point on have been well known as martial experts. In fact, when the British took over control in India, the Sikhs became quite, they joined the British military, and in numbers far outranking their numbers in the population in general. So they were protecting the persecuted people who were persecuted for their religion, whether they were Sikhs, Hindus, or otherwise. This wasn't just to protect Sikhs, it was to protect justice and righteousness wherever that was being threatened. The seventh guru is best known for opening hospitals and offering free medical treatment for those in need, again, irrespective of religious background. This was a time of relative peace under the seventh and eighth gurus. The eighth guru, interestingly enough, was just a child. He became a guru when he was appointed guru when he was 5 years old, and he continued to care for the sick in these hospitals. Unfortunately, in so doing, there was a smallpox epidemic, which he fell ill to and died by the time he was 8. The transition from one guru to another was generally assigned by the previous guru prior to his death. And the first 5 gurus, there didn't seem to be any biological connection between them, but from the 5th one on, it was passed down in family line from generally father to son. In the case of the 8th guru, it passed over. It went from grandfather to grandson, or from an uncle to the child, and then it went back to the next generation. So there was some nepotism going on here in the you know, 6th through 10th gurus. But at any rate, so the 9th guru worked to combat religious persecution, and ultimately he became the 2nd Sikh martyr. And with that, the 10th guru determined that there should be no more human gurus after him. The 10th guru is Gobind Singh, and he's second only to Nanak in terms of his importance in the development of the faith. And we could say that this 200-year period with the 10 gurus, 10 human gurus, was this development phase, and each guru adding something to what Sikhism remains to this day. Under Gobind Singh, he also wrote hymns and incorporated those into the Adi Granth, and in so doing, at that point, the Adi Granth was completed. And in 1699, so 200 years exactly since Nanak started all of this, Gobind Singh initiated what's known as the Sikh Khalsa. Khalsa, I'm not sure of the best translation for this. I refer to it as a brotherhood, but it does also include females. It was initiated initially as a military defense unit. And there's a story of how Gobind Singh gathered the Sikhs together on the Indian holiday of Vaisakhi, which is the middle of April. And he asked for a volunteer to come forward who is willing to die for the faith, to give their head in defense of the faith. And when one Sikh comes forward, they enter the guru's tent, and the guru comes out with a sword, you know, dripping with blood, and the presumption being that he actually cut off the head of the Sikh. And then he asked for another volunteer, and another. Eventually 5 of them came forward one by one, entering the tent, and the guru comes out with his bloody sword, and then all 5 gurus, Sikhs, come out after him. What he had done was, in essence, this is a test of faith, and they passed the test just by volunteering, being willing to give their life for the faith. And he had initiated them into the Khalsa. So they're referred to as the 5 beloved ones. And to this day, at the Golden Temple in Amritsar, there are 5 Sikhs who represent the continuation of the tradition of the 5 beloved ones. And in turn, then, Gobind Singh asked them to baptize him into the faith. So this was the end then of the human guru and disciples were all on the same level as members of the Khalsa. So to this day, being initiated into the Khalsa is something that many Sikhs aspire to, but it's completely voluntary. And in fact, anyone younger than, I think, 16 or so isn't allowed to do this. So it's something, in essence, it's an adult baptism. They call it Amrit in their language, but generally it's translated in English as baptism. So with this, Gobind Singh declared the line of human gurus to have ended, and he transferred guruship to the Khalsa as a whole, and specifically to the holy book, the Adi Granth, which from that point forward has been referred to as the Guru Granth Sahib. Granth is still book. Guru is a title that the guru is the teacher, and in fact, Sahib is simply a title of respect, like Sir or Reverend, revered. So Guru Granth Sahib, Adi Granth, it's the same thing. Gobind Singh died in 1708. And with that, we have if Sikhism hadn't existed yet as a fully independent religion, by that time it did. So the Khalsa is simply the community of the faithful. Now, in any given Sikh temple, Gurdwara, as it's called, some Sikhs may be members of the Khalsa, others may not be. It's, as I say, completely voluntary. You can generally tell who's a member of the Khalsa based on their appearance. They become, I'll talk about that in a minute. So one becomes a member of the Khalsa through the Amrit ceremony. This is one of the few rituals that has developed within Sikhism. It is a baptism and an initiation into the Khalsa, male or female, and must be at least 16 years of age. It is done by mixing sugar or sweetness into water, and Amrit is the sugar water, the sweet water, and one drinks this water, and it is stirred with a blade, and there are 5 Khalsa members who initiate a new Khalsa member. So just as the first one with the 5 volunteers into Gobind Singh's tent initiated him. Khalsa members take a new last name. Singh is, which means lion, is for males, and Kaur, which means princess, is for females. In India at the time, a person's last name generally would reflect their family heritage, which would include the ancestral caste of the person. And if you remember from our discussion on Hinduism, caste is linked to occupations. So much like in Europe, if your name is Smith, pretty much somewhere in your ancestral history was a blacksmith. And that would imply a certain level within social class. So eliminating those caste-based last names by everybody adopting a new name, it says, this is what I refer to as a brotherhood. Everybody's got the same name, even if they're not biologically related, we're all one family. It does lend itself to issues with next generations. But in marriage, often a Sikh woman will remain Kaur as her last name, and her husband's last name is Singh. So that women don't necessarily take their husband's last names. This is a European tradition. But it becomes challenging because what's the last name of the children? They generally take the father's last name, at least in our culture. So you get, the boys and girls, their last name is Singh, even for the girls. And having the name Singh doesn't necessarily mean those children are part of the Khalsa. So it becomes a little confusing. And if you look in this phone book and you look at how many Singhs there are, that doesn't mean they're biologically related. Khalsa members also wear kind of a uniform. The video referred to as the Ks or the 5 Ks, because each one of these in the Punjabi language begins with the letter K. And these are basically symbols of the faith that they wear. And the idea of wearing these symbols outwardly, day in and day out, at work, at school, out in the neighborhood, when you go outside, you're wearing your 5 Ks if you're a member of the Khalsa. And this is a way of saying, hey, I'm a Sikh, and even though I might be persecuted, I'm not going to hide that from the world. I'm a Sikh, and this is what Sikhism stands for. So everybody knows I'm a Sikh. So the 5 Ks include kesh, which is long uncut hair, both men and women. Generally women, you wouldn't even notice a lot of Indian women grow their hair long, and don't necessarily realize this, but Sikh men also do grow their hair without cutting it. This is why they have a beard. I should not say Sikh men or women, Khalsa members. And the men will wrap their hair on their head they'll wind it up in a bun and wrap a turban around it every morning before they go out. So when they're in public, you don't see the long hair on their heads, but you'll see their beards, and sometimes they'll wind those up and tuck it under their turbans as well. So, or there might be a net that they wear under it. The turban is sort of like a helmet, because Khalsa was initially a military unit. This is protecting the head. The turban itself is not one of the 5 Ks. It's the uncut hair. So men just wear the turban to cover their hair. Men in other cultures wear turbans, but each culture has a unique look to the turban, and the Sikh turban is very distinctive. The kanga or comb is used to keep their hair clean and presentable. As we say, cleanliness is next to godliness. And even though they wear their hair uncut, I think of the story of Samson when he had long hair and that was his strength. And a lion has a long mane. So I think there may be a symbolic connection there. Something about long hair being a symbol of strength, but also in India, well, there's two approaches to hair with monasticism. One is the Buddhist who shaves their hair, or the Jain actually pluck their hairs out of their head. So the monastics have no hair, and even some Catholic saints cut the tonsure. But since Sikhism is not monastic, this is the way of saying we're just the opposite of the monastics. So we let our hair grow. However, the Hindu renunciants tend to ignore their physical appearance, and they let their hair grow, but they keep it. It's matted. They don't clean it. They don't bathe. They don't comb it. So the Sikh comb serves to say, although our hair is long, it will not be unkempt. So the comb, generally they might tuck the comb in with the hair under the turban. The kara is a steel bracelet that's worn on the right wrist in order to encourage Sikhs to think about God as they go about their daily lives. Since most people are right-handed, wearing it on the right wrist means that whatever you're doing, it's going to knock on the table or something, and every time it does, you'll realize, oh yes, this is part of my duty as Khalsa, and to think about God. The bangle, it's unbroken, so and symbolism of circles is also present in other areas of Sikhism. It's basically eternal, like God is eternal. And it's supposed to be steel, not silver or gold, because not everybody can afford the precious metals. And again, we're talking about emphasizing equality. That doesn't mean that some Sikhs don't have silver or gold karas, but other Sikhs say they really shouldn't. The kach are undergarments that are worn to remind them to be chaste in their life outside of marriage. It's a symbol of purity. I also think it might be a symbol of readiness to always be wearing these undergarments so that you're ready to go to defense as needed without taking time to have to get dressed. You're already dressed. And the kirpan. The kirpan is a defensive sword. It's symbolic of God's power and the Sikh duty to protect the weak and persecuted. Now, there are 2 words for a sword in Punjabi. The other one is talwar. Kirpan specifically is defensive weapon. Talwar is offensive. So referring to this as kirpan is an emphasis on for defense only. Now, in practice, many of these kirpans are hardly sharper than a letter opener. They're more symbolic than practical. I've seen Sikhs who, women will pull it out of their purse. And yes, men and women do all wear these 5Ks once they're initiated as Khalsa members. Interesting story about being at Khalsa. This Sikh gentleman I knew many years ago, his name was Amrit Singh Kaist. He used Singh as his middle name because when he immigrated here and our nation, our country asked, well, what is your last name? He debated, should I say Singh or Kaist? And he wasn't particularly religious at the time. He figured, America, let me have a more distinctive name. He gave him his family name of Kaist. And over time, as his family grew and his children were growing up, his 13-year-old son became more committed to the faith. And the son inspired the father to become more committed and become Khalsa member and start growing his hair. Now, what happens with a lot of Sikh men, the Indian men who come here, they want to blend in with our society. So they cut their hair, they shave their beards. And you go to a Sikh temple, you will see Sikhs who are clean shaven. Clearly, they're not Khalsa members, and that's okay. There's no, there's no kind of looking down on them if one is Khalsa. So at that point, he kind of regretted having the last name he chose when he came here, but he was kind of stuck with it. But he used Singh then as his middle name, and that satisfied him enough. Other Sikh symbols. So let me share. In the back of this, we have the Sikh Khanda. These are the symbols that you will see in the worship room at a Sikh temple. These pretty much the only thing that is displayed on the walls. Their focus is to look inward toward God, and the only really ornate thing in the temple is the platform where they keep their holy book, the Adi Granth. But this, again, we see the circle, and we have a double-edged sword, and then we have two swords on the outer. One sword represents temporal power, and the other represents spiritual power, and the idea that they go together. Again, Sikhism, no monasticism, there's no separation. You live your faith in the world, so temporal is worldly power, and then spiritual power, and they combine forces in that way. So the double-edged sword represents God's power, the circle is continuity, and the two outer swords, spiritual and political balance. The other symbol we have here on the center right is the stylized writing of the word Ik Onkar, which means one God. And it is the first words that appear in the first hymn of the Adi Granth. And then there's the Golden Temple, which we talked about earlier. This is a place of worship, the seat of worldwide Sikh leadership. It's open on 4 sides, so people can come from any of the cardinal directions for all the world, and surrounded by a pool of water for purification rites. Not that those rites are a requirement to enter it, but they're there as a tradition. The local Sikh temples around the world are referred to as gurdwaras, or the door to the Guru, and the Guru, this being the Holy Book. As the 10th human Guru passed that Guruship onto the Holy Book itself, the Holy Book then has kind of under a throne. So I always think it looks like a canopy bed, a brass bed. And it's called a Gurdwara because it houses the Adi Granth, the Granth Sahib. A Granthi, or loosely translated priest, is essentially the caretaker of the Gurdwara and the holy book that resides within. He's also the spiritual leader of the community, but a lot of what goes on in the Gurdwara is led by various laypersons. So it's not like the Granthi does everything. And he often does pass off some of the tasks to volunteers from within the community. In the Sikh temple, mentioned earlier, a kitchen and a dining hall for langar. There's a prayer hall for singing of the kirtan, the hymns that are from the holy book. Typically, there'll be musicians who are playing traditional instruments. The harmonium, which is kind of a keyboard with a bellows on it, the tabla drums, traditional Indian instruments, and the tunes that go along with the hymns are traditional ragas. And it takes some training to be able to play these ragas, the traditional melodies. In India, the temples are open daily, they noted, and there's continuous reading and singing from the holy book, and food served to whoever might come. Here in the States, Sikh temples tend to follow our own time frame, and so Sunday mornings would be when the community gathers for worship, and it's as much about listening to the kirtan as it is participating in the langar, the meal that may take place before or after. And sitting together to eat a meal, everybody sits on the floor. That represents humility. And it also, if the President of the United States were to visit a Sikh temple, he too would sit on the floor. There's no such thing as honoring certain people by placing them up on a platform, a dais, so to speak. Sikh holy days and ceremonies, somewhat limited. The major holy day for Sikhs is Vaisakhi, generally observed April 13th, or at least here, the weekend closest to that. This is the anniversary of the founding of the Khalsa. Now, Vaisakhi is a general Indian festival. Hindus celebrate Vaisakhi. Buddhists also took Vaisakhi and turned it into the birthday of the Buddha, calling it Wesak. And various Buddhists in countries beyond India observe Wesak. So each religion that has grown out of India may incorporate some of the same holidays as cultural traditions, but have superimposed their own meaning onto it. So for Sikhs, it's not just a spring festival, it's the anniversary of the founding of the Khalsa under Guru Nanak, Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru. Nanak's birthday is sometimes observed and that would be in November. Not sure when exactly. That one, I'm not as familiar with that one. Vaisakhi is by far the number one. They have baby naming ceremony, the baptism, the Amrit, or initiation, the Khalsa, I talked about that, kind of the initiation ceremony. Weddings also take place in the Gurdwara with the community and before the Adi Granth, the Guru Granth Sahib. And for these life cycle events, babies or in honor of a marriage, the family might sponsor a 48-hour reading of the entire Guru Granth Sahib from cover to cover. And it would be a continuous reading. There'll be different people taking a place of honor to read from that in honor of the occasion. And with death, most Sikhs / Indians will cremate the body, but that's not a requirement within Sikhism. If they're in a culture where burying the body is more the norm, then they can do that. So they're not really hard and fast about the rituals, and even Khalsa is not required in order to be considered a good Sikh. The Sikh way of life, again, the video alluded to this. meditation and personal prayer, specifically morning and evening. Some Sikhs will have a prayer room in their home. If they do, it would generally be the highest room. In fact, many of the Sikh temples on the ground floor or basement level is where they would have the kitchen and the meals served. And the upper floor is where they would have their worship. Honest and hard work. Again, they're not renunciants. They do not leave society behind as part of their spiritual path. They live their spiritual path in the world. And charity, giving to help the poor and needy. The langar, the free kitchen is just one of representative of this, giving money to charity and supporting charitable needs and volunteering. This is all an important and expected part of being a good Sikh. Service to humanity, service to God, service to the Guru. And they do have strong family values. Marriage and children are the norm for Sikhs. And a strong identity with the Sikh community. There have been some political issues with Sikhs in India from the middle of the 20th century, when India got its freedom from Britain. And then there was the partition of India into Pakistan in the northwest, which is where the bulk of the Muslims of India lived. So the Muslims got their nation and the Hindus got India as their nation. And the Sikhs were literally caught between the two. The Punjab region overlaps the border between India and Pakistan. There are many Sikhs who remain in Pakistan, but at the time of the partition, many of the Sikhs on the Pakistan side of the border did migrate into India, while at the same time, many of the Muslims who ended up on the India side of the border migrated into Pakistan. Remember, back in the 1980s, if you remember the movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley, there was this scene after the partition where you saw lines of people going in opposite directions and throwing stones at each other as they went. But that was the Sikhs going one way and the Muslims going the other way. And I guess some of the Hindus who ended up on the Pakistan side also going into India. So because Muslims have their own independent nation, Hindus have their own independent nation, the Sikhs have been lobbying for their own independent nation carved out of one of the states in northern India, I think Kashmir region. They have not won that, but there have been some skirmishes around that. Khalsa members abstain from smoking, drinking, and the use of illicit drugs. This is one of the vows that they take, not only to wear the 5Ks, but also in their behavior. So, Sikhs.org, if you want to make that note, really easy to find that. You can learn much more about Sikhism from that website. I'm not sure about Sikhnet.com, if that's still active, but you can check that out too. Okay, so that's the end of our show. I have 8:40, so we have plenty of time to think about what we've learned and share some thoughts. So just as a reminder, my 2 recommended questions to think about, jot down some thoughts. What is one or more things you learned about this religion that most surprised or interested you? And how might you compare and contrast this religion with your own? And if you've got any questions, I'll see if I can address those. I may or may not be able to.
Did many Sikhs remain in Pakistan after the partition?
I don't know how many. If I wanted to find out, I would say I would go to my favorite website for statistics on the world's religions, which is thearda.com, THEARDA.com. And you can find out what percentage of any given nation follows whatever religion. So yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think, however, the second, in terms of percentage, Canada is actually second to India. So there's actually more, not by the numbers, but by the percent. There are more Sikhs by percent in Canada than there are in the United States, even though by number there's more here. Because Canada is only like about 10% of the population of America.
I was just wondering, because Sikhs don't go off outside of society when they renunciate, do they just worship at home, or do they have temples still, like around, like say in Canada, would you be able to find a specifically Sikh place of worship there?
Oh, sure. There are several Sikh temples, gurdwaras, right here in Fairfax County. And Prince William County has one or two. You know, mainly urban areas are going to have more by nature. But creating a community is an important part of Sikhism. If there are Sikhs who live in a rural area, they're not near a temple, then yeah, they'll worship at home as well. And even if they do go to a temple, say once a week, like most people in America do, they still will have daily devotions on a personal, individual basis at home. So why don't we have some silence for 5 minutes or so, give some thought to what you've learned, and then we can share.
I'm just wondering, I have a very good friend who follows the Baha'i faith,
Right.
and so many of the tenets you talked about tonight, she follows. And I don't want to say preaches, but she, talks about.
Right. Yes, the Baha'i faith is even more recently developed than Sikhism. That one Baha'i started in the 19th century, but it has its origin in Iran or Persia. So geographically, there's no connection. Theologically, as far as I know, there's no connection. But they do both preach equality and universality of humanity, equality of men and women. I think Sikhism was ahead of its time for 500 years ago. The Baha'i faith, I guess, for the 19th century, is still pretty much ahead of its time, particularly for Iran. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Both religions do share some of the same message. They're both monotheistic, the same one God for all humanity, male and female equality. But they do have completely separate sources of origin in terms of the teachers and the founders. And although both religions do have, we're coming out of an Islamic culture for the most part. If you want to think that 500 years ago, Northwest India was basically Islamic culture, but Hinduism was also in the mix there. Hinduism was not present in Iran in the 19th century to influence Baha'i faith. In this sense, Baha'i faith has more direct connections to Western religions, while Sikhism has a more direct connection to Indian religion and philosophy.
In that Persian area, I remember learning about Zoroastrianism and how ancient that is. And I wonder, is that still prevalent today at all?
Oh, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is really interesting because today It has more prevalence in India, but it did originate in Persia. But by the time Baha'i faith developed in Persia in the 19th century, Zoroastrianism was kind of no longer in the picture there because they had long ago migrated into India. But yeah, Zoroastrianism bears striking resemblances to Judaism and Christianity and Islam. I think perhaps historically, ancient Zoroastrianism is thousands of years old and may in fact have influenced some of the theological ideas that came into Judaism even before Christianity adopted them from Judaism. So yeah, Zoroastrianism, it would be something that one might study side by side with ancient Judaism and think about how those, without us realizing it, really some of those ideas that we're more familiar with actually originate with Zoroastrianism. But yeah, that has little connection with Sikhism, or Baha'i faith recognizes Zoroaster as one of the ancient prophets.
I'm going to come up here at front. Laura, thank you very much for some 3 great presentations.
You're welcome.
I know we all have learned a lot, and everybody on Zoom and everybody here. I just want to say one other thing. On December 3rd, from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, we'll be looking at the Sabbath film and discussing it. We had a viewing, and you're welcome to view it on journeyfilms.org, I think. It's a 2-hour film, and it's really interesting in terms of how we make Sabbath a part of our lives and how we take time out to be. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you.
You're welcome. I think we called this Eastern religions. We should have called it Indian religions.